as well as online. And special thanks to our panelists that have come here early in the morning to talk about Interconnecting Europe. Today we have Tonne, CEO of Statnett, Chris Peeters, CEO of Elia Group, Alistair Phillips-Davies, CEO of SSE, and Claudio Facchin, CEO of Hitachi Energy. And we're here to talk about Interconnecting Europe, specifically about how to build a stronger, smarter, and greener energy system to accelerate the energy transition. I'm Luiza Demôro, I'm head of energy transitions at Bloomberg BNEF. And at BNEF, we do a lot of modeling. We look at the future and try to understand how to get to a low carbon economy and what that actually means. And we have no doubt that renewables will account for most of the power generation in the future over the next decade globally, and Europe is no exception to that. Europe is in fact leading the energy transition, taking a leading role in the energy transition globally, and it also has the opportunity to be one of the first zero carbon, carbon neutral countries, regions around the globe. We see that governments, the European Union, and other stakeholders are making more and more ambitious commitments, and that is for sure going to lead to a deeper penetration of renewables. This is great news, but it also comes with many challenges. And to address those many challenges, there are some fundamental steps that need to be taken, and one of this is interconnecting countries and deploying this technology. In one of our latest models, looking at the future of the energy transition in Europe, we estimate that we could potentially jump from 20% of renewable energy penetration today to about 80% of specifically wind and solar penetration by 2050. And this is a lot. And interconnection and interconnecting countries across the region has the potential to provide great source of flexibility and also to reduce the generation from fossil fuels. As I mentioned to many of you, I have a lot more questions than answers. So I would like to just start jumping and speak to and ask here, what is that interconnections can do to speed up energy transition? What potential does it have to accelerate deployment and accelerate penetration of renewable energy in the region?
The energy transition for me is about being ambitious, it's about collaboration, and it's about being decisive and prone to implementation. And I think what we have done lately in the last 10 years in investing in two large interconnectors, both Nordlink between Norway and Germany, and not the least North Sea Link, which is in the middle of a trial period in the market. That is about being ambitious. That is about collaboration, not the least with our partners on the technology side and our partners on the TSO National Grid together with Statnett. And it is about decisiveness and actually doing something very concrete. And interconnection is a prerequisite for the renewable society. When we have weather-based and renewable energy mix increasing as part of the energy transition, we will have to exchange. We will have to expand the energy system so that we get the flexibility into the equation in a better way than we see today. So interconnection is actually a prerequisite and at the center of all of it. And it's very much a part of the agenda for Statnett. And in Europe, this is obviously also part of, for instance, the future of offshore wind and what we will need to see on new production and such. So at the center, have to be done in order to reach targets of higher electrification and a renewable society.
Thank you. And Claudio, of course, technology and innovation are needed for that, right? And you are at the forefront of this. What do you see as the role of technology and the role of innovation to accelerate this transition?
Yeah, sure. Just follow on Hilde. And I think in Europe, the whole interconnection aspect and creating a grid that can cope with this variability from renewables, but also can cope adding resiliency and reliability by looking at the bigger energy market, looking at how can we leverage within Europe incredible amount of resources, renewable like hydro from Norway, offshore wind in the North Sea, and then solar and onshore wind across the regions. And what it's clear to everyone that, of course, more needs to be done in terms of investments from a renewable standpoint in order to create the generating capacity that is needed to support the electrification that you also mentioned. On the other side, there is also no doubt that there is more to be done on the demand, on the efficiency, reducing consumption, electrifying sectors across. And in between, how do we make sure that we continue to invest in connecting the generation with the consumption? And in the equation, from a technology standpoint, we've also been very clear that it's not about one against the other. Given the speed, given the scale that we need to deploy in order to meet tremendously ambitious targets for carbon neutrality, we have to leverage all of them. And certainly, once again, Europe has been leading in showing how relevant all those components are, particularly when it comes then to interconnecting and leveraging those resources across within Europe, and potentially also, as we already see some of those coming beyond Europe to connecting other continents.
Thank you. And Alistair, you are very present in the UK, right? And we have had recent proof that interconnection is important and can make a big difference. I would love to hear from your UK perspective how interconnecting countries can play a leading role in making sure that we have a reliable energy transition and the importance of that moving forward.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, as you say, we've obviously heard some of the key reasons why we want interconnection. I certainly believe in it. The ability to have a greater diversity of sources of power coming into any particular area. Particularly, I think, as you go to a more renewable source of power, so you don't have the dispatchability that you would have with gas and coal, which are the traditional areas of that. We've certainly seen, even in our UK experience, there's quite a difference between winds blowing offshore and onshore, and even in different parts of the country. So then if you extend that model so that you're looking in different parts of Europe as well, and gaining access to the various generation sources across a wider geography, essentially ultimately, hopefully, a big, strong grid across all of Europe. You've got a lot more diversity, you've got more security of supply. At the end of the day, we need to provide customers with certainty of energy. Telling them that they can only turn their TVs on when the wind's blowing or when the sun's shining isn't necessarily going to please them. And so, as we move forward with this energy transition, we're going to build a whole new set of sources of generation, renewables, which will obviously at the moment onshore, offshore wind, solar and things of that nature. We'll also need to build a new and stronger set of generation assets and storage assets. We've got storage assets in the UK that we want to build. Our ability to access maybe storage assets in Norway and for Europe indeed to be able to benefit from some of the huge hydro schemes that are just generally in the Nordic area is going to be important. Whenever we've seen new interconnectors coming on, we've seen that that's had a positive effect in terms of prices, ultimately to consumers, by flattening out some of the volatility in those prices and also improving security of supply. So I think ultimately, if we all think that what we're aiming for is to look after the consumer, to deliver something that's green and net zero, that's affordable, and also provides them with the energy when people turn the switch on, rather than they have to think very hard about how they do it. There's a huge amount of grid scale work that I think is required to be done. People aren't going to want to put a lot of batteries and a lot of individual pieces of equipment in their own houses. People want that problem taken away. There'll always be those people who perhaps decide to be off grid, but the majority of people want the problem solved for them by companies such as the ones that we've got here and many of the companies that are obviously attending this conference. And that's why I see it as being absolutely critical that we have strong and robust grids, because they will ultimately deliver for customers, and that'll ultimately deliver for voters. So ultimately politicians will be very interested in that too.
And Chris, it's not just about connecting countries, right? We need to make sure that countries can buy and sell power to each other. So what steps do we need to take to make sure that Alistair's power gets sold to other countries?
Yeah, so I think I can only build on everything that you've heard here. So interconnectors are very key, but actually we need to go beyond that. Interconnectors should actually be looked at also as something to integrate offshore wind. So Europe has in its plans to quadruple the amount of offshore wind between now and 2030. So we took about 20 years to get to where we are. We have 8 years left to basically quadruple that, and it needs to be multiplied by 20 by 2050. And you can only do that when you have an efficient way of integrating those renewables, which means that you have an infrastructure that is there. And the other thing that you need to have is as well that you make sure that it's a stable environment. And so to make that happen, I think that we have to move from something which today is a little bit a lagging infrastructure. We wait until the wind farms decide they're going to do that, to some leading infrastructure that is able by hybrid, by energy hubs to integrate more and more renewables, because that creates an environment that can grow much, much faster than the one that goes one by one. And so that's what we need to create. Second thing that we are missing today is the fact that this exchange between countries is happening as a number of price differences in the existing market. But it's not happening yet as a way to decarbonize a country which is short with the means or the renewable energy that another country is long in. And especially Norway and the UK are very interesting for Europe in that perspective, because they're both countries that have an access of renewable energy going forward. Not yet, but they can build that up, and Europe will be short. And so having this in a framework where we jointly develop that, where the concept of PCI and CEF funding is moving towards having something more with neighboring countries, with friendly countries, is really key to that. And then secondly, making sure that we create that stable environment for wind farms, that they start to connect to those hybrid interconnectors, to those energy hubs, and that we then can dispatch it in an efficient way to the market where the demand is at that moment.
What is the stable environment for you?
Well, a stable environment, what we see today is a lot of those wind farms are looking for CFDs, to create a low cost of capital, to ensure that it's clear. They want to have seabed surveys done before they arrive. They want to be sure that they have a certain guarantee on the availability of the infrastructure in terms of getting this to shore. That's really what they're looking for. And if you look at all these things together, actually we have all these elements in our hands if we design them well. The only thing that you need to do is that you have to get that infrastructure before, and don't do it in the way we've done it with radial connections, where we basically said you build your connection at the moment that you build your farm. Now you say we build a system at sea that allows us, in the areas where we want to integrate renewable energy, that we have it already there. That reduces a lot the risk. That reduces also the risk of reliability of a grid, because you have people that are specialized in running that infrastructure, that are working together with technology companies, making sure that this is the very best thing you can see. So that creates that stable environment, that wind farms are for sure that they can deliver every electron they've produced to a market of interest.
May I?
Yes, please.
At one point, I think Chris described this excellently well. The one thing that is important for all the stakeholders, particularly here in this event, to understand is that these, of course, are highly complex projects to execute. It requires many stakeholders to be aligned on, how to plan, how to build, and then also how to operate and maintain and optimize the whole life cycle. But what I think is important is that the technology to deploy most of what we're discussing here is available today. What I think we need to all contribute jointly is on how to find the models to deploy that technology at the speed and at the scale that is needed to meet those targets. And then of course we as technology providers, we will continue to invest, innovating further, making this systems even more integrated, more efficient. Digitalization is something that surely we will talk about. But in essence, it is a mission critical infrastructure that we're talking about. It is complex, but technology is not the bottleneck.
Yeah, I would like to get a bit more technical now. What is this technology?
Well, when you look at specifically now interconnections, of course, there is the more conventional part, which is alternate current, which everybody knows, most of the overhead lines that everybody sees. The substations, the transformers are all operating on alternating current, on subtransmission, transmission, and ultra high voltage. And that was the sort of the build-up of that whole infrastructure. Now, we were the ones introducing some over 60 years ago the high voltage DC technology to complement and precisely to address the challenges of interconnecting or transmitting bulk power from long distances. And now this technology, towards end of the 90s, we took the next step, created what is known as the VSC technology, meaning leveraging also functionalities such as power quality, managing black starts, which is all functionalities that are needed more so going forward because of this additional complexity of renewables coming in. Within that, of course, there is always a combination, as I mentioned before, combined with interconnection. We need to enhance, upgrade, update the control system. We need to make sure that we provide technology so that the TSOs can actually deal with those additional power flows that are not like they used to be, one point to another, one direction, but it's actually both directions and multi-connected. The next step for us is to create, of course, hybrid system that would leverage the technology on both sides, and again, interconnections being, as Hilde was saying, a central part of that.
Thank you. And Chris, I wanted to talk a bit more on policy and regulation because this is really key. And as technology gets more complex, I think policies will need to get more complex too.
Yeah, no, indeed. And I would like actually to build on what we see at the technology side, and that we see today regulation is actually lagging towards that. So what we've seen is that we have always been proving before already technology-wise that we could do it, and then we had regulation to follow. And actually, I think unfortunately that is what we have to live with for the future. So we have, as companies, work together on the first hybrid interconnector. If you look at regulation around that, it's not there. So we have actually negotiated with the European Commission how do we run around the 70% minimum commercial interconnector use when you feed in wind energy at the same moment of time. And so we were able to do that for this one case, but now you need to find this, of course, that you can scale this up. I mean, we will have now soon multi-terminal interconnects coming up. I don't think that we have yet a stable framework. We will build the first energy hub soon in Belgium as an artificial island where we will collect multiple sources of energy on one point and redispatch them to the places of demand. Not yet the framework, and I think that what is important is that actually we all work together in the same direction and that we learn from each other. Yeah, we learn from the technology providers like to go each time one step further in the kind of solution that we could provide, and so we build it up together. Together with regulators, we're looking at what is the kind of system that creates the environment that we need for the future, but let's not make it stop us. Because what we have ahead of us in the terms of the ambition that Europe has set, which is in my opinion the right one, the scale up that we have to do cannot wait for, let's say, several years of implementation of grid codes like we've done in the past. It just needs to be much faster, and so we need to have this fast track parallel testing things and making sure that we understand, and meanwhile have then the stabilization that you can scale it up once we have the proof of concept around.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to build on what both Chris and Claudio are saying. We have to, when you look at the ambition of Fit for 55 of net zero in 2050, that ambition is going to take an accelerated process now. It's going to take tempo, and it's going to take a lot more integrated work, both with respect to collaboration, ways of working, new business models, decision making of the grid, especially when moving into offshore production. We will have to think planned and architectural, and the regulator will have to follow with driving this in the right direction. It's extremely complex with all the stakeholders, you know, together with the technology that is already there, driving this in the right tempo. Having said that, I also want to mention the system operation in all of this, because we see as a TSO that the way we have worked the last 30 to 50 years integrated in the Nordics, which is, you know, a lot to learn from that, it's now going even quicker into even closer operations together, also in Europe as such. And in order to deliver on the net zero ambition, we will have to work much more integrated and in real time, balancing markets through market designs that are new. This will take digital solutions. Those digital solutions are there, as Claudio is saying, the technology is there, but to implement this across borders, across sectors, in the new systems that the new energy systems are describing, that is fairly complex, and we're in the middle of that. It's costly, and but it's needed. You cannot do this, anything of what we're talking about here, without that integrated digital solutions that we have, automating system operations and establishing new processes across borders. We're in the middle of now learning from 2 large interconnectors from Norway to Germany and between Norway and UK, together with our partners here. That learning that we're doing is real. We need to take that into our systems and learn. So there is a limit to how quick we can move on. I'm pretty sure that the next thinking here is hybrid. It's linked to offshore wind. But in order to get this system operation to work more integrated across a meshed grid as we have in Norway, in the Nordics and within Europe, it's a journey, and it takes it time, and at the same time we need to think tempo. So I just wanted to put that in the middle of all of it, because having regulatory basis and having technology and having that market design development is going to take
and
decisiveness.
You mentioned it's really challenging, and I don't believe that ever policy and regulation will walk completely side by side with technology developments. But how do we get it closer so policy and regulation don't become or continue being the bottleneck?
Our experience is actually we are in the middle of that dialogue, and I think it's important for the regulators to really understand the challenge in the implementation here, because if we push this too quick, you will have a challenge in that as such. If you want to follow, timelines that are set by regulations only and not look at what this actually takes of technology implementation and new processes, I think you will have a crunch that will be difficult. Yeah. But if we have some flexibility and good transparency and good collaboration also there in the process, I think we can optimize and get the right tempo.
Yeah, I think flexibility is potentially the key word, because it's only getting faster, right? So if it's hard now, in 10, 20 years, I think the current framework and the way that things are done won't work anymore.
We're moving forward, and I'm very impressed actually to see how things are working, especially maybe now in the Nordics, into the rest of Europe, and we're going to get there. But there is a need for openness and transparency and good dialogues also there.
Thank you. And you mentioned the NSL, the North Sea Link, and the UK Nordic connection as well. Can you give us some examples of key learnings that we can take from there and apply to the rest of the world as well?
First of all, I have to say I'm really proud of, together with our partners, having delivered at this stage the North Sea Link on the level that we are. It's a bold project. It's a world record in 723 kilometers and 1,400 megawatt high voltage DC. I mean, this is technology at its bleeding edge. And so we're extremely proud and thankful for good collaboration. I think one of the main learnings is that you have to work through these large projects as one team. we have experts from National Grid, our partner. We have experts from Hitachi. We have experts from Statnett working as part of one team. And the collaboration models are crucial in this. And we have some learnings that, some things could have been done better from all sides. And I think those learnings could boil down to, are we thinking the right business models? Are we thinking in the right collaboration models? And we have learned along the way. But the success of this is what I'm thinking more about. This is a great delivery, and we're currently testing this out in the market.
Thank you, and I saw you nodding. Do you want to comment on anything?
Yeah, actually,
further?
I wanted to maybe Alistair can bring in another dimension of that technology, because there were also, from a European perspective, at the far front of leveraging this HVDC technology and create multi-terminal, multi-nodal, which is the next step to overlay that technology to the existing grid infrastructure.
Yeah, sure. So, look, some people may or may not appreciate, but doing switching at high voltage on DC networks is slightly more complex. It's a technical challenge that would lead to Claudio and his CTO and people like that, but they have solutions, but it's a little bit different from just flicking a switch in your house, essentially. As we see greater interconnectivity and across greater distances, which I think we all agreed at the start, or hopefully we've all agreed and demonstrated is really, really important for the energy transition going forward, we're going to see more of these HVDC links. To date, a lot of them have been built point to point, and particularly in the offshore market, which is a really lucrative part of that market. A lot of it's been connecting UK, Ireland to the continent, or connecting up offshore wind farms, and obviously the North Sea's got huge potential there. But then having switched systems, with ABB, with Claudio and his team, we're putting the first switch system into Europe with Shetland. We originally built a big link to try to unbottleneck onshore development of transmission lines, which is what we'll see more of, I think, certainly in the UK. We're looking at several more we call them bootstraps down the side of the country, because it's very, very difficult in a crowded country to get planning permission to build the overhead lines. We built that link with the intention that we connect Shetland for the first time ever, so Shetland will come onto the grid, bringing huge benefits to them as well, because they'll be part of a grid, a lot more security of supply for them. So we've got that switch system in there, and I think people have alluded to having more interconnectivity, talked about hybrid grids, which will be, if we've got large power stations in the middle of the North Sea, can we build lines in the other direction, away from the UK or away from Europe towards the UK, and therefore create essentially interconnectors that utilise infrastructure that's been put there. As Claudia said, I think that'll be quite a complex issue in terms of policy and regulation. I wouldn't underestimate that, because in my time in Europe, I think although there is an overarching energy policy within Europe, each country has, you've got very, very different generation sources, let's say between France and Estonia, where one's very nuclear based, the other one's very, very oil rock based, for instance. Huge differences. You get that reflected in their regulation where they want to go, but it's a problem that we'll all have to solve. It's been great that obviously Statnett and National Grid have solved that problem to some extent by building a big interconnector, the North Sea link, which is commissioning now, which is great, but we're going to have to spend a lot of time working on that. Technology, as you say, isn't the issue, but I do think policy and regulation will continue to be a problem, because we're going to evolve from a lot of these point-to-point connections to wanting to build something that's more like a North Sea grid, or at least some sort of hybrid grid there, and with some hybrid points, and then getting countries to agree how that should happen, and getting regulators to agree how the different pricing mechanisms, particularly now that the UK has left the EU, I think will be more tricky, and that's what I see as being the issue. And you talked about getting lots of people together to agree on certain things, and that just takes a while. It's going to be very, very important, and the UK has a real imperative to do it now that we've had our Prime Minister say that he wants to decarbonise the electricity system entirely by 2035. So we're kind of sub 14 years for decarbonising our electricity system. An interconnection to Europe and a lot of these hybrid systems are going to be, I think, critical in helping deliver some of that.
And I'm really interested on Shetland, on the Shetland multi-terminal link. How that how this model can get replicated? How the model can get replicated?
Well, the technology's there. Different people, depending on what they want in their markets, I think will come up with different regulations. That I think the issue you have is that you will get different countries will decide on different things. I think we all know in Europe, although there can be some high-level agreement on things, there's lots of individual people want to have control of what's going on, and sovereignty hasn't been given up on a number of these matters around energy, although the policy set at a global level. So look, I think replication is, if we put the Shetland link in, we should see the benefits that we get from that. The thing has to work, Claudio, so no pressure there when it comes. Just saying, you'll send the bill and we'll just check the switch works, but no, the initial stuff looking very good. I think once we can demonstrate it works, I think then you'll see more and more of that happening, because you'll just save money on losses and things like that. Transforming it to AC just to do a switch and then transforming it back to DC the other side is going to be difficult, and you'll see more instances where people want to put high voltage sort of long distance lines together and have some sort of switch, a wire, even a four-way switch where you've got two things coming in and two things going out. And well, it's a fantastic technological challenge for you and some of your competitors in the industry, but we'll want it because that's what we need to deliver. Again, going back to that thing for customers, as we see more and more wind farms built out in the North Sea, when we go from probably 16 gigawatts today to 40, 50 gigawatts probably by the end of the decade, suddenly there'll be a greater and greater need to actually utilize some of these assets. It'll just be driven by cost and affordability and actually delivering what consumers want, I think.
And then if I may just jump in here, very important. So from first of all, I think we're all seeing this as a European continental energy market system. We don't look at the same boundaries as EU versus UK and so on. I think that is one important piece. And of course, that scale, it's one of the enablers to replicate the technologies that we were just talking about. On our side, 2 points. First of all, that technology has already been tested somewhere else outside Europe, so we're very confident that it is the right next step.
Where?
For Europe.
Sorry.
It's actually coming from Asia. China has been developing that technology. We've been part of that and created already an existing system that is operating at basically ultra high voltage on DC, and created the first model for a HVDC grid. And we've been part of that journey as well. The other part, which Alistair also mentioned, we have to, with everyone on the technology side, with our competitors, to join forces and create a model and a design that allows interoperability. So that allows then the TSOs and the end users of these technologies to be able then to compose the system, because there is no way on earth that one single technology provider could deal with the complexity that we're talking about and the scale and the speed that we're talking about.
I'm so glad that you mentioned interoperability. That's a good
And one thing on that, even interoperability between the competitors, so therefore essentially Siemens and ABB, ultimately there is some benefit, there's some real benefit to society for making sure that if one person's built a Siemens link, another person's built an ABB link, they have to kind of meet in the middle and get a marriage of convenience somehow to make sure that still works, and that's going to be really important too, and for any other technology providers that come into that market.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the China case. Any other example of technology deployment for interconnection across the globe that could be used as lessons learned, either successfully or not so much?
Yeah, as a global leader, we've seen since inception and introducing this technology to the market, different markets driving different needs, including, by the way, Brazil would be one of the important that used because of the geography, because of the large-scale hydro available, but far from the consumption points in the urban areas, and there is more in that direction when you think about a more and more interconnected electricity system. We just have been honored to execute now a new interconnection between Saudi and Egypt. And that also, by the way, includes also 3 terminals, precisely because it's future-proof. They want to look at, okay, what is the next need? And some of the other players are already working into the Greece geography. And in the future, this could generate interconnections and exchange of power flow across continents. And once again, all what we're saying today, the technology is there. We will continue to make sure that as a next step, everyone can get more of it, because it is really about the speed, it is about the scale. And then one thing that Hilde also mentioned, if you look at digital technology, it's clear to everyone that it takes, the tempo, as you mentioned, they tick by, not by years or decades, they tick by quarters. and that again is something that is a challenge to deal with then regulatory environment that is used to plan on decades.
So, just one brief part. I think one great advantage of some of this technology is the fact that Brazil, China, or Asia and other places, we know here as part of this conference that we have an issue where Europe is maybe leading, leading the energy transition, but we've got lots of other parts of the world that we need to bring with us. And the fact that these other technologies are deployed elsewhere, it gives us real opportunities to talk to other people and to communicate and to try and spread the issues around the transition, that it is a global issue and a global matter. So I think for me at this conference, that's what's really come home, is how we take lots of people with us. And whenever you get examples of particularly us looking at what other people have done in other parts of the world, it's a really helpful part of how we take the whole world on that transition. And it's also something I think is very important with our policymakers who, if doing everything we can in the UK is fine, but we need the rest of the world with us, and therefore being able to have those conversations where we can see that there's positive action from the rest of the world, I think is
and of course,
really helpful.
The same applies to market regulation as well, right? Yeah. Not only for technology front. Before we wrap up, I would love to hear from each of you. What do you think the single next key step is to make sure that we accelerate or keep pace with a fast energy transition through interconnection? Here, would you sorry?
The one key step.
One key step.
Ensure the tempo and ensure the development in the right direction. I think I will mention collaboration. I think I will mention, if we are to reach the ambition and get the decisiveness needed, we need strong and transparent collaboration, whether it's on the regulatory side, whether it's on the technology side, partnership, development of solution side, hardware, software, whatever it takes, and market designs, collaboration towards a joint objective. And if I may add one thing that is a bit concerning, but it's also something we really have to do, and that is to emphasize and step up on the dialogue with people. I think when people, industries, societies, local societies understand where we're going and how we get there, and that is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to overcome the crisis that we're in. I think that dialogue needs to be stepped up in a much more transparent way that we have done so far. This has been a discussion among the elite. This has been a discussion among politicians, among business leaders, yes. But I think, the people of the world need to be part of it in order to see where their lives are going. And that step is probably the biggest one.
Do you have any example to mention on where this collaboration is working well that could be replicated?
Pardon?
Do you have any example to mention of where collaboration is working well?
We might see, a small beginning of it with respect to a renewed dialogue around the need for investments from the TSO side. I'm being very concrete now. We have a dialogue in Norway. Norway is an energy hub. Norway is 56% electrified already based on 100% renewables. And we are, of course, also an oil and gas nation. That shift, moving from being dependent on oil and gas into utilizing what position we already have on the renewable side, is a dialogue that we have started in a small country as Norway is. But we have started it, I think, in a more open way than we have done before. And I think to continue that is very much needed in our country, in the Nordics, and in Europe, and in the world. Otherwise, we will have social unrest and non-understanding for the move that we're doing.
Thank you. Alistair.
Look, I think really it comes down to policymakers, I think the step, because I'm a business person, and I've got the pleasure of being with business leaders here. I think businesses need to make clear to policymakers what they have to do, because I think people can run after solar or wind or the renewables or storage or flexibility, but ultimately I think people can sometimes forget just how important the networks piece is. So my single biggest step is for businesses to align and to have a very, very clear single voice that in the markets we operate in, we always see grid as the biggest issue in terms of trying to go through the transition. Grid is the biggest issue in building wind anywhere. Do you have a grid connection? We recently bought a very early stage, large scale development business in Japan, and obviously, two of the things is that they've got 2 grid connections there. Unless you have those grid connections, because ultimately at the moment in Japan lots of grid connections go to nuclear power stations, but there's no guarantee there's any wind where the nuclear power stations are. I can guarantee you in this country there's very little wind where all the coal mines are, and most of the power stations or most of the big grid connections in this country are on top of coal mines, and so therefore that's why we've got this huge explosion in the amount of grid we need. So I think it's up to businesses to point out, one, how long the planning regimes take and how difficult it can be, and secondly just the fact that you need to completely restructure your grids in order to be able to deliver the energy transition. So that's the one step I'd emphasize.
Thank you. Chris?
Well, let me build on that. It's all about speed. Now what you see is, I think we have, or let's say politicians making very ambitious plans, but we're not yet very clear on the how. And if you look at the how, these are these kind of issues that you need to solve, where you say like we need a lot of infrastructure, a lot of leading infrastructure, and as I've said on many places now, that needs almost COVID-like measures. If you want still to get fit for 55 by 2030, it needs COVID-like measures, especially on the speed of developing infrastructure. If you just start to draw it out, then you say like, well, half of the infrastructure is not yet there, and we have to build it before 2030. And so far, typically building such an infrastructure, the building was typically fast, 2 to 3 years, but the time before we could start building was easily 8, 9, 10 years sometimes. If we cannot reduce that time, make better plans, make policies that are more focused on making that happen, and as well having that dialogue between, for instance, like how do we manage around the environment. We see now that sometimes one, let's say, typical species can block a whole infrastructure project for 3-4 years. Can we have a better dialogue around that? These are important issues that we need to solve, so we don't want to deny those issues, don't sort of say it's not important. But if each time we have some rules of the past that block the progress that we have there, we will not get there. And so it really is a focused effort of everybody around the table, environment people, because I don't see the technology need a supply chain to be the bottleneck in the coming years. The real bottleneck today is getting permits, getting environmental approval to make it happen. And so there are a lot of work needs to happen, because of course that needs to happen in collaboration with the environment that we work in. It's not that we say like, oh, we have to force it through. That's not what we want to say. We just have to say some of these procedures are just much too lengthy compared to what actually needs to happen, and we need to find good solutions to that.
Thank you. Claudio?
I would just add certainly collaboration, and I think once again, if I look at it from a global perspective, I know there is a lot of things to improve also within the European energy system, but there is quite some good examples of collaboration within Europe as well, the Nordics being one. A lot of what also Chris is doing to create a hub at the center of Europe to create that power flow. Scale, I would say, in addition to collaboration. It's really about scale. There is no way on earth that we can get to the target without building scale, and that needs to be built across all stakeholders. And at the same time, I think you made a very important point. It's anticipating the demand. So for that, we need also scale in terms of capabilities to plan for the entire European energy system, and not going point to point, project to project, but having a overall system framework that then will allow all the parties then to plan, invest, so that we can scale.
So in some, technology is there. Technology is not the bottleneck. Policy and regulation are challenging, but we're optimistic that that can be sorted out. Collaboration is key. Anything else to add as closing remarks?
I just hope our multi-node system works. Basically, let's hope. I just want Claudio to deliver on that technology promise, and we'll just keep delivering on the sort of policy and other stuff.
When do you switch it on?
Ask Claudio.
Claudio.
It's going to take a couple of years, but we're on the right track.
Yeah, exactly.
I will put a reminder on that.
Yeah.
We'll be back.
We're going to have it in the diary. We're going to come back to Glasgow, especially to have a big Glaswegian celebration with some iron brew and heavy.
He's confident, so I'm convinced.
And good luck.
Thank you.
I think with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Great to have you all here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.